I will start on the modeling musical time, and the idea, you know, this day artificial intelligence is very fancy, and you say, can a computer play chess? Yes. Can it check a mathematical proof? Yes, and there are new results on that, nomotopy type theory and so on. Can he find a path from A to B in city roads? Yes. More difficult, can it recognize a smile face? Yes, your picture, your camera is doing that. Can he walk on two legs? More difficult, but yes. Can he play music together with a human musician? And by playing musician, I mean exhibit some performativity. I don't want to play electronic sound here, but just put in accordance the time of the machine and the time of the musical play. And that's, in fact, a difficult problem. That's the computer rendering. No. Up. Just stop. A computer rendering of a score. No, you're supposed to listen something.
But we listen something.
No? No, you don't listen because up. What happens? Just a problem. Tac. No, that's a problem. Okay, if it doesn't work, I just put my... Non, je crois pas. Okay, again. No, it's here. Okay, sorry for the delay. Okay, so I want to... That's the computer rendering of what is written in a score. Just again, up. Affichage, non. Okay, so you have the computer rendering of my score, and it's very rigid and it's not good at all, but the computer is playing exactly what is written in the score. If I put a real performer, so I use Lang Lang because it's very marshmallow, very sweet. It's not the same rendering at all. What I want to stress is that, in fact, playing music is a live process. The performer is putting information which is not in the score, and I have to take it into account. If I do only what is in the score, I don't do live music. I do some kind of recording, but not very interesting. So you have already seen the example. If I want to make some accompaniment, I have to understand what is at stake during the performance. And that's the problem of mixed music. In mixed music, you have electronic sound. You are playing with machine, so the machine can have a score, but how can I put his machine score in a live way. And the idea of Frantescofo, the system I want to show you, is that, in fact, we will listen to the performer, then we recognize what is played, and then I can react accordingly and in the timing of the musician, the timing that is produced live, built during the live performance. That's difficult because, see, for example, that. When you play, you make some mistake. It's not really exactly what is written in the score. So the listening part must adapt to the human error and the machine error, and despite that, progress on making the things. The piano is produced by the machine, and we are following the voice. Sorry? It was done on purpose. It was done.
Everything is numerical there, or the voice is?
No, the voice is the voice of a real actress, and she's not a singer, she's an actress, and this was done for a stage on theater, and she's supposed to sing in the bathroom.
So the computer tries to cover the mistakes of the singer.
Exactly, and to follow him, to produce the correct accompaniment. When you can do that, when you can produce correct accompaniment, you can do more complicated things. Here we follow an alto, and the computer is used to produce some electronic sounds, the first song you sound, but you will see also you want to produce the spatialization of the sound which is recorded on the stage. It will do some mixing here, it will change the level, and it will produce all the data that are needed to produce the electronic sound that goes with the performance. Here you have the piano roll, it is just a representation of what is played by the cellist, the altist, sorry, and we follow it. The system, as a listening machine, we recognize in real time what is played, and then we produce the electronics by some computation. And here you have the score with the electronic action interleaved in the score, which is the score played by the cellist, the altist, and we produce the song. We make some level and some. It's supposed to move at some point. But anyway. Okay, to do that, you have to understand what is the time, how the time is built live, the timing relationship in music. It's not the time of physics. The time of physics, okay, here is the time of physics, it's a atomic clock. So you see that you can have a very small atomic clock. That's more the time of a computer guy, a computer scientist. It's the Procus. Procus was a Greek general, and when he win a battle, he take the enemy and he put it on his bed. And when the enemy was too big, he cut what is outside the bed. And if it is too short, it just attract the people. He want to see all the things at the same size. Okay, that's the time of a computer scientist. And that's definitively not the time of a musician. There is a lot of literature about what is time in music. And for example, here is a composer reflection on musical time, Gérard Griset. This article is very famous, and he distinguished between three kinds of time: the skeleton of time, the flesh of time, and the skin of time. And it's very enlightening to read the article. It's enlightening, but at the same time very frustrating, because you follow what he says, but how to put that in an executable settings? How can we instantiate it in a computer program? And Langer, which is a musicologist, said that an aesthetician, say, okay, music makes time audible, and its form continuity sensible. So there is a strong relationship between time and music. But what I want to say is that if music is the paradigmatic arc of time, which kind of time is music and art? What kind? Can I make more precise what is the time in music? And Grisez said at the time in music is an exchange, a place of exchange, a crossroad that coincide a number of different times, the time of the score, the time of the performers, the time of the conductors, the time of the listeners, and so on. What is interesting is that by putting this, the idea we want to have on musical time into a computer, we can test it. It's a kind of philosophical experiment, a real experiment where you can test your idea of time. Are they effective, and can they help, or have they some kind of musical interest? To see that there are different ideas of time in music, I use two categories introduced by Boulez, which is striated and smooth time, le temps lisse et temps strié et temps lisse. And he said that that's a kind of striated time. It means that you have encore. The encore are les coups d'archet. You have point, and these points are salient. And if you want to do some things, you want to do these things related to these anchor point. But in smooth time, you have a kind of fluxion. They are continuous objects in evolution. It's a continuous flow. You lack of anchor, but it doesn't mean that you cannot have some corresponding action or process, but these action and process are more in sync with the speed of evolution and not with anchor point. Okay? That's just an example of two different approaches of time you want to approach in music. So let's enter a little bit in time zoology, because time is a heavy object, a heavy notion, and it was studied from the Greek, obviously, Aristotle and Kant. And for Kant, which take some categories introduced by Aristotle, time has two objects, instant and duration, and they are related by three relationships: simultaneity, succession, and permanence. Simultaneity. Alors, these relationships are it's themselves in relationship. For example, each of these relationships is the negation of the two others. For example, if it's not instantaneous, it's neither before nor after, then it has to last at the same moment. So non-simultaneity and non-succession is permanence, and so on for the other three. So that was developed a long time in philosophy, but it happens that it has a real meaning in computer science. In computer science, you can classify the language according to these three relationships between computation. For example, I believe that the most language you know belong to sequential languages, and in sequential languages, you speak only about succession. You say, I make this computation, and after that, I make this operation. You cannot speak about simultaneity or permanence. There is no lasting computation. What you have is a sequence of atomic computation, but the time taken to do this kind of atomic succession is absolutely irrelevant. What is relevant is only the succession of atomic computation. It happens that that's not enough. For example, if you do real-time programming, for example, if you want to have a computer system that make autopilot on a train or a plane or a car, it's very handy to say, I want to do some things at this moment, at this date. So you have to speak about simultaneity. So at the beginning of the 90s, a French school has introduced what is called synchronous languages. And in synchronous languages, you deal with succession, but also simultaneity. You can say, at midday, we go to lunch. But they don't deal with permanence. In fact, there is very few languages that deal with permanence. Permanence, duration, are very often handled outside a program. Okay, by verification system and so on, but it's difficult. There is no real programming language until Antescofo that speak about duration and permanence. This classification, these three relationships are also relevant in music, because in music you do harmony, polyphony. Harmony is more on the succession. Polyphony is a simultaneity. Perhaps I have said okay. What about duration and permanence? If you do MIDI, in MIDI you don't have a duration. You say, I start to play a note, and after some time you say, I stop to play the note. But you don't have an explicit representation of the duration of the note. Obviously, having a starting event and an ending event of the note, you can recover the duration. But the duration is not internally, it's not an internal notion in MIDI. But sometimes, and you do a lot of music with MIDI. But if you want to do rubato, accelerando, going twice as fast and so on, then you have to do some computation and you want to represent duration. I want also to point out that a score is both discrete and continuous. For example, the instantaneous event in a score are the onset of a note, the start, the attack of a note. The duration is the duration of the note. But there are also continuous change in pattern. Here you have a traditional score notation, and here is the graphical notation of a piece by Ligeti called articulation, and you see that is completely graphical. And we are using smooth and continuous variation of things, but also some events, because they are discrete entities and continuous change of these entities. You can say that why perhaps we can do the same things as in math. In math, for example, you have the real, you are the interval of the real, but you don't introduce the interval as a kind of new entities. You say that intervals are a set of continuous reals from a starting real to an ending real. But that's causes some logical problem when you are dealing with time. Suppose that you have a predicate, a temporal predicate, that say that a bulb is on or off. Okay? So, for example, here, that's the real time, and at some time you switch the bulb. And now I want to define the predicate that say the light is on. Okay, the light is on this interval, and it is off on this interval. And I'm interested here on what is the value of this predicate on t exactly. That's a problem. Because you say, okay, my interval is a closed interval, then t is at the same time open and on and off. Okay, I don't want that. I want only a one state, not being in two states at the same moment. You can say, okay, it's open interval. But if it is open interval, then I cannot say that the light is on or off at some point. That's not satisfactory too. So I can say it's open, the interval is open on the left and closed on the right, but why do you do not choose the other convention? In fact, being on or off is a predicate, but this predicate is defined only if you have a neighborhood of the point you want to consider. Exactly for a speed, like the speed. There is an idea of instantaneous speed, but to define a speed on a point, you must have the position defined on an interval on the point you want the speed. So that's exactly the same for this kind of temporal predicate, meaning that if you want to reduce intervals, duration to set of instants, you have to do real analysis, topology, and use heavy things. In Andescofo, we choose to handle differently instant and duration, and not to reduce one of the notion to the other, because it's much simpler. We have also to ask ourselves question, okay, what is an instant? I show you an instant on a line, so it means that I can give you a location of instant as a number on the timeline. That's an idea of chronometric time. You have a Sharad clock. I look at the Sharad clock. It's not here, but okay, they get a Sharad clock. And I can say, okay, it's at this time. It is a coordinatization of the time. And that's an idea which is very Newtonian. It's in Newton time. And you can measure time in minutes or seconds, but that's commensurable unit. If you express time in 1 unit, for example in seconds, you can translate it in a minute or in millisecond and so on. And this prescription is shared. It's distributed between the things. That's not that happens always. There are a notion of relational time. Relational time is that you have different clock, and you can relate the clock, but not always. And that's the event that creates the time itself. For example, when you say, it's called by the sociologue epochal time. For example, the epoch of dinosaur starts by an event, which is the first fish that goes out of the sea. And this epoch, this duration, stopped by another event, which is the arrival on Earth of a big meteorite that kills everyone. And that's more an idea of Leibnizian time, a relation time. You are defined by events, and the events are related by themselves. You are not defined by a clock. An example of relation time is the Roman notion of time. So I hope it's true, because there are specialists here, but the idea of hour in Roman, une heure, hour, are defined as, say, the 12th part of the light part of the day, if you follow me. So it means that one Roman hour in summer is much bigger than one Roman hour in winters. So when you say to a Roman soldier, okay, we have to go to the next war camp, it's just 2 hours walk. The Roman soldiers must say, but winter hours or summer hours, because 2 summer hours are much longer than 2 winter hours, and that's more effort. That's not a good notion of time if you want to measure, for example, to have a loss for falling stones, because falling stones means that they don't fall the same in winter and in summer. The Newton law is much more difficult to express. But when you have to finish at the same time as another guy, that's a good notion, because it's we finish when we meet at the station, and you don't have to say we have to meet at 12 at the station, which implies to having a shared clock, and the shared clock must propagate the signal, and so on. So relation time is a legitimate way of defining time, perhaps not for expressing physical law, but for expressing other kind of relationship. It's very easy. So how to talk to time? And here we have two guys, John McTaggart and Arthur Prior, that have clarified something. For John McTaggart, you cannot speak about time, so that's a bad news. And for that, he said, okay, we have, in fact, if we look how we speak about time, we have 2 ways of speaking about time.
Sorry, Johnny, what you say? You cannot what? Time?
You cannot, in fact, there is no coherent logical notion of time. Okay? You cannot. Okay, sorry, I missed the thing. Now, John McTaggart was a philosopher and wanted to show that, in fact, notion of time is a psychological notion which cannot be logically grounded, and you don't have to think that you can formalize it. It's a kind of hallucination, of human hallucination. And why? Because he said that there are 2 ways to speak of time. And these 2 ways to speaking of time are called A series and B series. In B series, you characterize an event as by binary predicate. One event is before another or after another. And if you do that, you can choose, you can pick one event. You say, okay, this event is the origin, a distinguished event is my origin of time, and all the other events just succeed like that. It means that, in fact, you have a geometric notion of time where the time are on a line or on a tree, depend of if you on branching time and so on. But the problem of that is that every event has the same status. A future event or a past event has the same status, so there is no real future, present, or past. So that's not the real way of speaking of time. It's a geometric way, and you do geometry and not chronology. So A series is a good way to speak of time, but you said that, okay, my event is just now, or is in the future, or is in the past. And he said that's not logical. You cannot, the same event can be at the same time, joking, in the past, in the future, now, or in the past. You have to choose. So it means that this is not really speaking about time. It's speaking about geometry on a line, for instance. And this is speaking about time, but it is completely incoherent. So time doesn't exist. It's just a psychological category which cannot be used to do serious work. That's bother Arthur Prior, that come after, because Arthur Prior was interested by another problem. Can I preserve free will if I have a deterministic process and so on? And for doing that, you want to have an open future. That is, you want to speak about in a Assery style of about the things. But John McTaggart said, the Assery style, you cannot use it because it's illogical. So John McTaggart, Arthur Prior said, no, McTaggart has a bad idea of logic. In fact, I can have a relevant logical theory that speaks in the Assery styles. And he developed some things, and it turned out that he belongs to what is called modal logic, when you add some operators to logic to qualify what happens. It starts with temporal logic, and then you can interpret it by some other things. And now you have epistemological logic, knowledge logic, and so on. They are all variations on the idea of modal logic, but the initial idea of modal logic was to add some operators to contextualize what you say in logic. And the context here is a temporal context. So here you have several kinds of logic, but the idea is that you have the future, that's this kind of tree. On each point, you can evaluate some predicates that say you what happens at some point. And you add, in order to move into these trees of future things, or past things, you add some operator. For example, when you say finally P, it means that starting from the present, going by any kind of path in the future, you have to fulfill at some point the predicate P. Okay? Globally, it means that all future states must see P and so on. And you can see that these predicates are unary predicates, and so you are really in the Assery style of things. So that's temporal reasoning in logic, in a modal way. Is it relevant for music? Yes, because a musician use time. For example, composer may approach time in a geometric way, so in a B-series styles. For example, here you have I think it's yes, it's Mozart, and in fact. It's a palindrome, yes. And so you have two players. The first player starts for the beginning and goes, and the other player goes from the end to the beginning. If it starts from the end to the beginning, it means that the time described in this score is not the real time in life that you cannot, that can only goes forward, but it's a geometric time. And for example, a lot of things, to follow in that, a lot of operations you do in a score are geometric operations. For example, transposition is just shifting in the pitch space the note. Repetition is shifting in time. A motive is something you can have a reflection, a retrograde reflection or inversion, which change the things, and so on. And that's a simple geometric operation. And I can show you a small example. When I start from a motive, I reflect it in time, I make some inversion, and the result, in fact, can be just seen as a kind of Moebius band. And when you turn the Moebius band on the music box, in fact, you are doing inversion. Iteration is just you go to the band 2 times, enfin 1 times, but to have the same things and so on. So that's just an example to show you geometric nature of things. But here is another example. It's just to answer some questions that say, can I have a spatial representation of music? Yes. Sam Mara, a composer, Lee Westwood have produced that. They have been used space filling curve. Okay, you parcours a space, and when you parcours the space, you say, I have a note or no. So this, for example, this, using the rule to set the note or no, this pattern represents the beginning of this score, and then they use some kind of reflection in a kaleidoscope, but just for fancy graphical representation, and they make determine the things just to give a notion of the tempo. So the music you listen is pictured, but is moving graphic. But I urge you not to consider that seriously. Why? Because if you look at the performers, okay, that's a fancy graphical visualization, but what are the performers are looking for to do the music is the traditional score. So when some people say, you have some, okay, but that's graphical representation. You have to look what the performers are doing. And this is very different. What happens in the score is very different from what happens in the performance. Here is a performance of Steve Reich Pendulum Music. No? So the score describes a process. Yes, no? Yes. Dramatic tension. Okay. And the music is not extensionally written. It's not written on a score where all notes are played. It's a process, and only the realization of the process gives you the music. It's a kind of intentional score, if you want. So that's the zoology of time, of way of handling it, what you have to do with time. So how can I represent time with all this kind of zoology? And my point is that this time, to do what we have seen, can be done if you consider time, from the point of view of a machine, as a kind of timed event in a synchronous framework, which call for a two-dimensional representation of time. And I want to show you why. To explain that, the best analogy I have found is the analogy of a closest line and corde à linge. Okay, why? Because on a closest line you have a line, so you have the sequence relationship that happens. You have event. The event are the close pins on the close line. But these pins, I have to deal with simultaneity. So you have, contrary to a real close line, you can put two close pins on the same point of the close line. But in the close line, you put some, you have some duration which is between two close points. But this direction is elastic. You can stretch your closes more or less in order to change a little bit the relationship. So I want to have a time that looks like that, but I have to pinpoint it with human, because the machine has to be in sync with the time of one human, one performer, but music is played with a lot of people, so you have a lot of close line to do that. And that's the Antescofo approach of mixed music. You have here a score, which is a kind of usual score. There is a lot of less detail in the score used by Antescofo with respect to the real score used by the performer, but it's a good approximation. So, an Antescofo program is a musical score in the traditional sense. There is a score of the electronic action, and there is a last part which says, I can relate the two, and that is given by the composer, out of time. And in time, during the performance, in real time, we say in music and in computer science, we do the execution, and the execution is listening to the player to know how we progress in the score, which means that we know what we have to do here, because there is the synchronization part that say, we have to shape the electronic action to fulfill the musical relationship that appears in the score with the actual realization. And for doing that, I have to listen what the musician is doing. I have to detect the event, but I have also to detect the duration, and the detection are detected mainly by having an idea of the tempo, which is a kind of speed, but not really a speed. I want to go back on that later. For now, I want to focus on what I can say about the relationship by themselves, not relating them, but by themselves. And for that, what I say is that we need a two-dimensional time. And I want to convince you that, in fact, you are already doing with conditional time. When you have to do some kind of computation of complex expression like that, you want to add 3 quantities, and these 3 quantities are dynamic variable. They change value of time. So at some time t, you want to compute this quantity. But for doing this quantity, you have to first to compute the first addition and then the second addition. I have said first and second. It means that there is a relationship, a timing relationship between these 2 operations. But I have to do it at the same time, okay? So there is only one way to do that. I have the time of the t variable, and I have the time of the computation, okay? And I can show like that. An event has a kind of duration in the ordinary time, if you want. It lasts. So the duration are done in this axis. There is another axis, which is the axis of computation. Not only the computation, it's the axis of causal dependency. 2 things must happen at the same time, but there are some dependencies between them, and these dependencies give a total order of them. So an event is a 2D area, and saying that B is after A means mainly that the right corner is identified with the left corner. You can have, if you say, I want to do some things at midday, so you have to say it's the midday. In fact, the only way to do that is to have elementary actions that have no duration. They have no duration, but they are ordered. They happen at the same time, but they are ordered here on the causal line, on the dependency dimension. Obviously, when I have to implement some things in a computer, every computation takes time. So when I realize the dependency that had done that, even for especially for computation that have 0 duration, they take some time to compute. But what is important for us is that we say that they're instantaneous at the level of the program. At the level of the implementation, they are not instantaneous. So a logical instant has in fact a deepness, an épaisseur, it takes some time. But what is important is that the logical time, the logical instant, the implementation of a logical instant take less time than any delay, any duration I want to handle in the program. If the logical instant is shorter than any duration relationship, then I'm okay. Okay? And that's exactly the synchronous approach, except that in synchronous approach, you don't have delay. But happens. Okay, so this idea of 2D event with a causal dimension or dependency dimension on a duration dimension, I must relate them with what happens on the different actors in time. So I have multiple times. For example, here I have the times written in the score by the composer on the timeline of the electronic action, and they are related. For example, I want to produce this sound exactly with this note. I want to produce this song, but this song is defined relatively to this note, which is to this computation, which is defined relatively at this point. Okay? So I have a complex relationship that links the temporal relationship of the electronics with the temporal relationship of the human part. That's done out of time in the score. But then the musician come and play. And by playing that, in some sense, the musician give a realization of the score. On this realization, you can, as I show you on the first slide, is not an approximation of the score. It's just filling the gap which are implicit in the score. You have to see the score not as a full specification of what to do, but as an open specification where the musician, the player, has some freedom, some hole, some room to add some new information. And the new information is a realization with stretchable time, but changing some things. For example, a musician is not supposed to commute to musical events. But he can change a little bit the tempo, for example, to make rubato, to have some gesture. So it's a kind of smooth time, if you want. And the computer knows the score, knows the relationship with the electronic, and then he has to take into account this bending, this stretching, this completion of the score to produce the completion of the electronic part to be produced by the computer. How can I produce the timeline, the live timeline of the electronic action, having the timeline of the musician, the timeline of the electronics at the compositional level, and the actual rendering. To do that, we use an idea which is called a time-time diagram. So I have to relate one time to another time, the time of the musician with the time of the score. So in our score, we have an idea of temporal scope. And temporal scope is just how to define a new coordinate with respect to another coordinate, a temporal coordinate. That's, for example, the temporal coordinate of the player, and you know what happens only when it happens, and you have to produce the coordinate timeline. Okay? And what you have to produce can be rather complex. For example, here, it's a map of every curve here are the data you have to send a very high rate to synthesizer process, and this curve must be stretched following the tempo of the performance and following the event that you don't see it that happens by when the piece is played by the human performer. What you can say is that you are speaking about a lot of time. For example, temporal scope is how to build a time with respect to another time. But philosophers don't like very much to speak about multiple time. For philosophers, there is only one time. And they say, okay, you argue that you are introducing new time, but that's not true. In fact, what you are doing is just having some kind of exchange rate between two temporal units. And why they don't like the idea of having several time? Because, for example, if you have several time, you say, okay, I have the speed of one time with respect to the other, but when you look at that, it means that you have a third time to look the first two times and to relate it. So you have an infinite number of time. That's completely stupid, so it's better to consider that as a kind of exchange rate between the things. I agree in part, but not completely, because at least when you see a score, there is a relative time in the score, which is the time of the music, and it's not the chronometric time. And what I argue is that this time has a kind of autonomy. Okay? There is an autonomy of the relative time, and this autonomy makes that it's not good. It's not a right approach to consider that the relative time is just another unit to currency exchange, if you want, between the chronometric time and the time of the score. Why? Because, for example, the score. The exchange rate between the relative time in the score and the timing relationship that appears during the performance, the exchange rate is only known afterwards. Is only known when I'm doing the performance. I cannot say you in the future when 10 bits correspond to 10 seconds, because I have to wait at this rate. So you can understand it as an exchange rate, but it's like a bank that never gives you the exchange before the operation. So it's not really a good operation for you. And musicians want to write relatively to a tempo in a relative time, and this notation is not proportional. It's not related, obviously, in the physical time. But for the machine, we have to relate it. So how we can do that? We can do that only in real time. And to understand that, we are using something similar to the space-time diagram in physics. Space-time diagram in physics relate spatial variable to time. For example, here you have the footprint of a horse. So the time goes from left to right. And you put where the horses put the things. Perhaps it's a better understandable space-time diagram with the space-time diagram used by the train in order to say where the train is at some time. So if you have the station, and here you have the time, and so you can using this kind of gram, you know if you can catch your correspondence at some station. That's only on one line. If you have several lines, the time-space diagram can be a little bit messy, but that's the timetable for Switzerland, for example. So how can we do that? Here we have a time diagram that relates the chronometric time, because at the end, I have to put all the things during the performance with the chronometric time and what happens in the score. So if I look at the ideal relationship of the event in the score, for example, this is a note, my starting note, and I go at a given tempo. Here I set that I put 60 beats per second. So it means that you progress in the score following this straight line. And when you change tempo, you change the slope of the line. So a score is a kind, if you accept accelerando, ralentizando, etc. It's just a piecewise linear function where the points are on the line are the event. If you see what happens during the performance, in fact, between two events you recognize on the musician, you cannot tell anything. The time relative to the performer is flowing, but you have no observation, no measure. It's like a kind of quantum system. You cannot measure anything. You can only look at the event. Between two events, you don't know. But, and we will see that, it's the end of my talk, we have some kind of magic box that computes some tempo following the past histories of events. So here, I put the piecewise linear function that represents the score, and suppose that I just compute that the performer is going a little bit slower than what is given on the score. So I can use this inferred tempo, anticipated tempo, just to forecast the arrival of the next event. And because my slope is a little bit lower, instead of having the next event here, I have the next event here. But it happens that, obviously, the musician is not is not keeping the tempo very quiet, so the real event comes here. So a performance is just a set of points, and the set of points with a projected line, which is I can anticipate. For example, when this point arrives here, it arrives later than the tempo in the score, but before the tempo that was anticipated here. So here I have a new slope, which goes a little bit faster than the previous plot, but lower than the score in the tempo in the score. And the job of the system is to use the information in the score, the piecewise linear function in blue, the point you have with the anticipated tempo I can compute, to reconstruct a timeline which gives you the timeline of the electronics. And what kind of curve can I use that can be seen as an adaptation of the temporal relationship in the score and what happens really? For example, here, what I propose is to use what we call the loose interpolation. It depends on the musical context. I'll give you some example after. But here we say, okay, my adaptation to the live performance is just to take into account the tempo. So I arrive here, there is a new thing, the new event. The new event gives me a new tempo, so I change my tempo, but that's it. I don't look at the arrival event, but I adjust the tempo of my progression in the electronics, following the tempo I can infer from the sequence of the histories of events I observe. Okay? But I can do other things. I can say, okay, I have the electronics to do, and I have a lot of computation. So I follow what I think is the tempo of the performer, but then the performer just contradicts his tempo by giving me a little bit earlier the event. What I can do is say, okay, I forget the rest here, the computation I have to do it, and I jump here to continue. So this adaptation is no longer a function, it's just a continuous function, it's a discontinuous one where I made some jump. If the event arrive early, I have vertical jump. If they arrive late, I have horizontal jump. These two ways of reconstructing a timeline from the information can be seen at two extremes. In one extreme, it's very smooth. I don't care about the event. I care only about the tempo. In these other things, in the other strategy called tight, it's tight because I'm tight to the event. When I have an information of the event, I use it. And when I have no information, I use the tempo information. In fact, I can make a little bit of the two. I can smooth the things between the two. For example, here I said that, okay, I'm progress here of the things. I'm progressing along the blue line. At some moment, I have an event. And the event tell me that there is a discrepancy between the location of the human performer and my location. When I say I'm the computer guy, so it's the electronic. So there is a discrepancy. Can I absorb the discrepancy on a time window? Okay, and so it means that instead of following this tempo, I have another tempo here. I adjust it, and I adjust it continuously in order to arrive at the end of my error recovery window with no difference in position and with the same speed. So you have to find a catch-up curve. It's like a missile that tries to catch a plane. I'm here, and I have to catch the plane in 10 minutes, so I can compute a trajectory just to reach the plane with the same alignment of the plane, so with the same tempo in 10 minutes in the future. Okay. We can do that. Okay, that's the electronic. That's a real recording of what happens. There is a perturbation here, and I give a time window. So, in this example, the time window is a sliding time window. I say I want to recover in 10 minutes, and so not 10 minutes, in 10 seconds, and change it. So it's okay. I'm happy for that. So now the things is I can say that, okay, but for that you have to infer the tempo. On my last presentation here is on how can I infer the tempo from the histories of events that happen on the musician. And for do that, I'm using a phenomenon which is called clock sympathy. And here you have an example of clock sympathy. You have several clocks, and they are unrelated. The clock is the metronome. We put it on the soda can. The soda can has nothing to do here. It's just to decouple the support in order to make possible a better energy transmission between the clock. And the clock will synchronize because there are some kind of mechanical energy that goes from one to the other. The phenomena was discovered by Huygens. Huygens tackled another system which is having a time sufficiently stable to compute longitude. And he has an idea of using two clocks for being more precise than one clock. And he just observed that his two clocks were synchronizing from one piece to the other piece. So we do that. We do that and, with a very smart approach. The idea is that I suppose that the player has an internal clock. And I can do that even if I don't know what the player is playing. I don't know what the player is playing, but I know that every event in music is usually quantified. So if I have a clock that goes fast enough and which is in sync with the player, every event of the player must arrive at midday. Okay? You said that in fact it is a clock that changes, but it goes fast enough such that every event, which is a quantified version of one, if I go to the right speed, I always make one turn when an event comes. So when I arrive after midday, it means that my representation of the musician clock is late, and if I arrive earlier, it means that I'm going a little bit too fast to record the time of the player. So the phi here is the phase relatively to midday. It can be computed that, and I can imagine having a dynamical system that compute the period of the clock, which is related to the tempo I postulate for the musician, and I can adjust, I can anticipate the next period, and then I can add some coupling term here that depend of the phase. If the phase is not 0, it means that I am going too fast or too slow. I use a coupling factor here just to adjust the new phase on the new period. In fact, it's this equation that interests me. Okay? So I do that, and here you have an example. In green, you have what is written in the score. In pink, here, you have the real tempo of the musician, and in blue, you have the predicted onset of the next event. And you see that it stabilizes around the things, and it stabilizes pretty quickly in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In 5 events, I converge to what the player is doing. Just note that there are 2 coupling factors. One coupling factor that adjusts the phase, and one coupling factor that adjusts the period. If I use the coupling factor that I've used for the previous experiment, and I use it in a performance that is blurred by a Gaussian noise, in fact, I have very bad result. I have bad result because the blue one is the variation of tempo of the electronic is bigger than the green one, which is the variation of the player. It means that I have to adjust the coupling factors, and in fact, in front of a random noise, if the random is really random and Gaussian, symmetric, what you do is just don't adjust. Stay at the same things. But if I don't adjust, if the player is really changing the tempo, not a noise, but a real change, I do not converge. So,
Talking about tempo.
sorry?
Talking about tempo.
Yes, it's a tempo.
Should adjust anything.
So that's finished. So we can couple the coupling factor with the idea of the fuzziness of the play. The idea of the fuzziness of the play is given by a number which is called kappa, and which represent a density. It's like a Gaussian, but on the circular domain of my clock. Okay? And with that, here you have a real performance. That's the performance you can listen. And here I adjust my tempo. And in yellow, you have the resulting kappa. And it means that here the tempo approximation is very good. It's less good, so the coupling factor has changed in order to keep it more in sync, and so on. Voilà. Yes, just note that's the instantaneous tempo. That's the tempo of the player. You compute with the previous event. You said there is a lot of variation. So in fact, having a good tempo with this variation, that's big variation, but it's instantaneous, and a tempo in music is not instantaneous. It's a kind of averaged quantity. So the previous quantity is good. This is the observation, and you have to produce the previous one with this one, which is a kind of tour de force we do with the large tempo. And that's it. I finish here.
Thank you very much.
Because we are in Italy, it is just short extract to show that temporal relationships are closest line, as I mentioned before.
Okay, are there some questions?
Per entrare in casa mia, ecco che cambiamo.
Ma di che ha paura? Lei è così sicura delle sue idee?
It's
No.
difficult to talk. Sophia Loren, Marcello Mastroianni.
Yes.